Good evening and welcome to a live virtual town hall meeting with your 22nd District lawmakers, Senator Sam Hunt, Representative Beth Doglio, and Representative Jessica Bateman. This is a live event, so type a question in the comments of whatever platform you're watching on, and we'll relay your question to your lawmakers. I'm going to pass it off now to Senator Hunt for opening remarks. Senator.
Thank you, Guy. Beautiful picture of the Capitol campus there. I'm Senator Sam Hunt, serving my second term in the state Senate. I chair the State Government and Elections Committee. I sit on the Ways and Means Committee, which is the Budget and Taxation Committee, and also on the Early Learning and K-12 Committee. So 3 big committees, lots of time and meetings right now. And today we had tomorrow we have our cutoff, I think, for bills out of House of Origin. That is House bills out of the House and Senate bills out of the Senate. So we will start into phase 2 very shortly. And off to
Representative Doglio, please.
Hi, I'm Representative Doglio, and thank you so much for joining us today. It has been a very busy, short session, and it is nice to wrap up Policy Committee cutoff tomorrow night. We did wrap up the Environment and Energy Committee, which I chair today. We got a lot of great bills out. I hope to talk about some of those in the rest of this meeting. And I also serve on transportation as well as labor and workforce standards. So looking forward to getting into issues quickly here. Representative Bateman.
Hi, everyone. Jess Bateman here. This is my 4th year serving in the legislature, and I serve on the Healthcare and Wellness Committee, Housing and Capital Budget. We are fast and furious working our way through a very quick and short legislative session, and I'm looking forward to hearing all of your questions and talking about all the bills that we're working on for you.
Thank you so much. Now we have our first question, which is for Senator Hunt. And the question is about special education. You can see it on the screen. Can you tell us what's happening with special education funding?
Thank you, Guy. Well, a lot is happening with special education. A little background. In 1972, when Congress enacted the Education for All Handicapped Act, the legislation stated that the federal government was going to pay 40% of the cost of educating students with disabilities. Even now, all those years later, that has never happened. And the federal government's aid is not 40%, it's somewhere around 13 to 15%. So a number of years ago, we had instituted a cap on special education. It's a sort of a false cap. It doesn't relate to the number of disability students in a school or a classroom. It started out as 12%. In other words, the assumption was that only 12% or less of a school district population would be students with disabilities. That was never the case, but it was a way to cut the budget. We raised it to 15% last year. And this year, legislation is going through to raise that percentage at the state level to 17.5% of students with disabilities. So the state says if you have up to 17.5%, it will fund them. Over 17%, which I think Olympia is already slightly over that, will be up to levy dollars and other dollars. But that is one way that we're trying to address the funding of disability or handicapped education.
Thank you so much, Senator. Now we have a question for Representative Bateman about crime in Thurston County and Pierce County. Representative Bateman.
Thank you for the question. I know it's something that we're hearing about from our constituents. I just met with some of our grocery workers today, and they talked about the challenges that they're experiencing with some members of the public. I want to first acknowledge that public safety is a complex issue impacted by many things, including our healthcare system, behavioral health services, our ability to provide inpatient psychiatric facilities and services, and also substance use disorder treatment for folks that need it. We're working on all of those in different areas and in different committees, many of them coming to my committees that I'm working on, and I can talk more about those in detail offline. But I think one thing that's really important for us and something that we're working on in the 22nd is making sure that we have enough law enforcement officers per capita for our state's population. Right now, we're not at that level, and we have work to do in order to provide enough law enforcement officers that our communities need. We need to enhance and increase basic law enforcement academy funding. We have a budget proviso in the 22nd to fund a training center actually in our district, because another thing that we're hearing is we need to have those training centers in different areas of the state. So folks that are going to them, it's a long process. We don't want them to be far away from their families. So we're working on that and getting funding for that. And then in addition to that, we do have some good news on the catalytic converter front. We heard about that the first 2 or 3 years that I served in the legislature. And we know that we passed House Bill 1815 in 2022. And we saw in the first 6 months of last year, we saw a 77% decrease in the number of catalytic converter thefts in Washington state. So we know that that bill is working. So there is some progress that we're making on some fronts. We have more work to do, but we do want to make sure that we have training and enough law enforcement officers for our population.
Thank you, Conley, for that question and that answer. The next question is to Representative Doglio, and it's about old growth forests and salmon and the environment.
I think the question was specifically, how do I prioritize that? Oddly enough, I was just talking to Chair Theringer, who chairs the capital budget, about the various requests to actually acquire old growth forest, legacy forests. There are a number of proposals from different communities that are on the table, some of which could potentially use funds from the Climate Commitment Act. And so we're sort of sorting through those and trying to figure out what is the best use of those dollars in the Natural Climate Solutions Fund under the Climate Commitment Act. It's obviously a very important thing that we preserve these forests for our children and their children moving forward. And we have a lot of opportunity to do that in the state right now. So we will continue as a delegation. I know our delegation values that, working with our Thurston County commissioners and with many of you in the community to prioritize funding for forest protection. And we'll continue working through. There are a lot of requests on the table. So working through which of those make the most sense and trying to make good decisions around that for our children and their children.
Thank you so much. Now we have a question for Senator Hunt again, and it's about the 6 initiatives to the legislature that came this session.
Well, thank you. And just quickly, Guy, are you reading the comments? Somebody says that we're not live on our individual pages. I don't know if we need to address that or not, but
I believe we're trying to fix that.
Okay, thank you. Well, the 6 initiatives are initiatives to target major legislation that the legislature passed the last couple of years, and also a couple others that have impact upon our schools and elsewhere. The initiatives made the ballot because one disgruntled person spent $6 million of his dollars to pay initiative gatherers to put these initiatives on the ballot. So there's not really a large public uprising. They went very selected places where they signed the initiatives or print them. I never even saw one, but yet they had enough constituents to get them on the ballot. The legislature has different options. First of all, we have 2 different types of initiatives. There's an initiative to the people, which goes directly to the people, bypasses the legislature. There's a referendum where the voters can get enough signatures and challenge a bill or a law that's been passed. Or there is the initiative to the legislature, which is what these 6 are. And they're aimed at climate control, they're aimed at education, they're aimed at breaking down the school system by creating a burdensome requirement that every time a student coughs, the teacher has to let the parents know that that student coughed. It's not quite that much, but there's a lot in there. And, I think it's sad that we have these initiatives. The legislature worked very hard on them. We got them passed, and they're in effect. And I would hope that we don't see them passed. The alternatives are the legislature can adopt the initiative and it becomes law. The legislature can create an alternative to that, and then both of them go on the ballot as an A and B, like I forget what the number is, 2111 A and B, for instance, or we can just not act and it goes automatically to the ballot. I expect the legislature to do the latter and let the voters decide in November what happens on this and not take them up as part of the legislative session.
Thank you so much for that question and that answer. The update I have is that this town hall is live on all the lawmaker pages right now on Facebook and other platforms. We have a question now for Representative Bateman about housing, and I think you know a little about that. The question is about the cost of living crisis and the housing crisis in Washington and how we can fix it, along with fix the issue of wealth concentration.
Thank you. Yes, the question has to do specifically with homeownership opportunities. And, we know that homeownership is a significant way that we can create intergenerational wealth building opportunities for families in Washington state. It's also a way to ensure that you have a stable monthly cost for your mortgage. We want to make sure more people have that opportunity. Last year in 2023, we passed a number of housing bills. We called it the Year of Housing. A couple of those bills aren't even being implemented yet. So House Bill 1110, which will require cities to make it legal to construct middle housing. Middle housing is defined as duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, up to sixplexes. Most cities make it illegal to build those diverse housing types that are more affordable than the traditional single family home. We also passed House Bill 1337, which was Representative Mia Gregerson's accessory dwelling unit or ADU bill, think tiny home or granny flat. Both of those bills have a rolling implementation based on cities' comprehensive plan timelines. So we have yet to see the fruit of our labor for those pieces of legislation, but they are specifically designed to create homeownership opportunities in the form of different housing options that are not apartments or single family homes. That's why it's called middle housing, because it's in the middle between both of them. We also did pass a bill, the Covenant Homeownership Act, which will help first-time homebuyers. I think now that we've passed those pieces of legislation, there's a couple more bills this session focused specifically on diverse housing types and homeownership. We did pass the Representative Barkas lot splitting bill off the House floor the very first day of session. That bill is really integral to achieving our housing goals, because in order to have, for instance, a duplex, you want to be able to split that lot right down the middle so you can have homeownership opportunity. You can get lending for the half of the home that you're going to buy as your home, but you have to be able to do that by ownership, and that means you have to split the lot. That bill is now in the Senate, and we're hoping that that bill will continue to move forward. There's also a Representative Davina Dewar bill that will help make it more feasible to build these types of homes through the building codes. So making sure that middle housing isn't commercial building codes, it's residential building codes, which will hopefully help developers be more inclined to build those, making it less expensive and more feasible. And I think that going forward in the future, we have to look at increased opportunities for funding for homeownership, lending, and also in our housing trust fund, a focus on land trusts, organizations and community cooperatives that can buy the land and keep it, and then have the home be much more affordable. That's the Habitat, or that's different from Habitat Humanities for Humanities model. But I also think that we should be investing more in organizations like that. And then lastly, I'll just say that now that we've passed a number of these housing bills, we have to focus on things like workforce, making sure that we have adequate workers to build this housing that we need, and the financing and all of the additional things that need to happen in order for the housing to get built. There is a significant focus on this homeownership area, and I'm looking forward to working with you on it.
Thank you kindly for that question and that great answer. We have now one for Representative Doglio about the Climate Commitment Act. And this constituent asks whether it'd be better to send the money straight back to the people through lower taxes and fees, or put it into projects.
Well, I'm glad to see that you want the Climate Commitment Act to survive, and at least this person here. I think there's a lot of ideas on the table about use of those funds. We certainly want to make sure that we're utilizing those funds to actually reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And what that translates into is healthier communities for all of us. It means that our kids can get to school on a quiet and a clean bus, an electric bus. It means that our workers at ports can be utilizing electric shore power as opposed to the dirty diesel that they breathe every day, day in and day out. It means that the Yakama Nation can put solar panels over irrigation dishes, both saving water and providing really inexpensive free energy to their members that are part of their electric utility. They have their own utility, the Yakama Nation. So lots and lots. It means a third of our budget in the Move Ahead package. I mean, that is a third of our budget for the Move Ahead package, which is our transportation package, making sure that we have good roads and bridges and the infrastructure to move goods and services around this state efficiently and effectively, and to move people efficiently and effectively as well. So I too want to see this Climate Commitment Act survive, and I do think that we certainly want to make sure that the agricultural community, which is exempt from the Climate Commitment Act, is made whole. There were a little bit of hiccups in terms of making sure that we were living up to the statute that was put in place. So I think there are certainly ways that we might get money back into people's pockets as we move forward through this session. It remains to be seen. No decisions have been made, until that budget comes out.
Thank you for that question and that answer. Now we have a question for Senator Hunt about ranked choice voting.
Oh, goody. Are you completely against ranked choice voting? Yes, I am. I think we have a good election system. I think we should choose the one candidate that we like and vote for that candidate. And I really worry that ranked choice voting would make it very confusing and maybe disenfranchise people with disabilities, people who aren't speaking English as their first language. And I'm just not a fan of it.
Thank you very much.
I happen to be a fan, so we're on different sides of this issue.
Yep, we are sometimes. You can be wrong. That's all right, Beth.
I'm also a fan.
Thank you all. We do have a live question that just popped up that Representative Bateman wanted to take about rent stabilization. And the question is it's right here. And it's about developments in terms of rent stabilization or rent control for folks who can't move into different housing.
Thank you. It took me a minute to get to my notes. I wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to address this question. So this year, like many other years in the legislature, we have a bill to stabilize rent. What that means is House Bill 2114 is a bill that will put a percentage cap on the amount of rent that can increase in any given year. We know that many individuals across the state are experiencing exponential rent increases. We hear in our district of folks that are on limited incomes, our seniors, young people that are getting $500 a month rent increases, and it's unsustainable for folks. And it can lead to being more rent cost burdened, spending a third or more of your income on your housing costs, and also makes you more housing unstable and more likely to fall into homelessness should you have an unexpected expense that you can't afford and you have to make really difficult decisions. So what this bill does is it tries to have a predictable amount of rent increase that is allowable, but not excessive. We had a couple bills last year that didn't pass, an anti-rent gouging bill and then another rent stabilization bill. The sponsors of those bills went out during interim and got feedback from landlords and from tenants. One thing that landlords expressed was, in Washington right now, we're seeing individual cities coming up with their own proposed rent stabilization and notice bills. So by having a statewide policy, it's going to provide that consistency so they can all operate on the same playing field. There are some caveats within the bill that I want to make sure that people are aware of, because one of the criticisms of that legislation is that it might stifle any kind of new construction, and we want to make sure that we have a supply of new housing coming online while we're addressing the near-term issue, which is that people are unstable in their homes and they're experiencing rent increases that are excessive. So it does provide an exemption for new properties for the first 10 years. So we can still see that new construction happen. It also requires 6-month notice for an increase in rent of 3% or more. And notably, it creates a landlord resource hub online that landlords can utilize to help them understand the process and all the different types of changes that are being made. Because we know that, like in Olympia, for example, one of the cities in the 22nd legislative district, a majority of our constituents are renters. So we want to work with landlords and provide them all of the resources that they need so they can navigate this system while also maintaining their rentals and having this reasonable percentage cap on how much they can charge for rent. It also provides enforcement with a private right of action, penalties by the Attorney General in Washington State. If you have more questions about that bill, please email me at jessica.bateman@leg.wa.gov. That bill is in the Appropriations Committee in the House. We also have a Senate version, and we continue to work to get that bill to move forward.
Thank you for that question and that answer. We now have a question about a bill for Representative Doglio. It's a question about getting people to transition away from gas. I believe the bill number is House Bill 1589. How can House Bill 1589 help people transition off gas?
So Puget Sound Energy is the largest dual fuel utility in Washington State. It covers a good chunk of Western Washington. It's both a gas utility and an electric utility. And the company actually came to the legislature, came to me and said, we would like to run a bill that helps us help others, our customers, move off of gas over time. This is a long-term bill. There's nothing in the bill that's going to stop you from getting gas and heat into your home, tomorrow or even in the next decade. What it does do is it sets up a planning process. So over time, we have pancaked these bills on top of one another. The Clean Energy Transformation Act, which requires 100% clean electricity by 2045, and the Climate Commitment Act, that has us lowering our greenhouse gas emissions over time. And the utility has lots and lots of plans to make sure that there's stability and there's also affordable utilities that is all overseen by the Utilities and Transportation Commission. So they have these very long and detailed planning processes to make sure that the energy is coming into our homes and it is affordable and accessible. And so this bill is it's a planning bill. It kind of allows the utility to look at their system as a whole, as an energy company, not a gas company and a utility company, and really look toward a future where we are beginning to electrify folks. So some people are going to be electrifying their own homes. Me, for example, I've totally gotten rid of gas out of my home. I can afford to do that. We want to make sure as people do that, those who can't afford to do that are not left with super high gas utility bills. And so there are things in the bill that really make sure that Puget Sound Energy is using their dollars to help people actually make the transitions in their homes over time as we move towards a carbon-free future.
Thank you much for that question and that answer. We have now a question for all three of you. And I'm going to put it on the screen. And it's about, would you take up the sheriff on his offer to go on ride-alongs for all three of you? So
I have a really funny story. Absolutely, I'll go. But I have to say that Chair Fye, he chairs the Transportation Committee, he apparently went on a ride-along with the State Patrol. And a vehicle pursuit happened while he was in the car, and he said he was really petrified and very nervous. So I'm a little nervous based on that story, but I do want to say it also makes me recognize, how important, how dangerous, and how much I appreciate our law enforcement. So I'm very much looking forward to riding along with Derek Sanders and learning more about what it's like to be on the job.
And I'll answer to, I would be happy to go with the sheriff after session, of course, because we're a little busy right now. I have had the opportunity to do a ride along with Olympia Police Department, Lacey Police Department, and Tumwater Police Department after we passed our police accountability legislation. I wanted to see firsthand how that was being implemented on the ground. It's very enlightening to see actually what happens in real life, not just on paper. It's hard for us to do that if we're not in that field. And I would be happy to take him up on that offer.
I would just respond, I haven't done one in a while. I've done ride-alongs with the state patrol and with some local police. After session, we'll see what happens. I wouldn't mind doing that. He's an interesting guy, and the more we can learn, the better off we are.
Thank you all very much. The next question we have is for Representative Bateman, and it's about folks asking, what do you think the most important bill is to protect trans youth this session?
Thank you for that question. I know it's something that all three of your representatives are really passionate about. I want to highlight first a bill that we passed a couple years ago that folks might not be aware of, but it was a really important bill. So in Washington state, gender affirming care is required to be covered by all insurance. And in 2022, we heard from patients and advocates that medical insurance companies were actually challenging the medical necessity of some of these gender affirming care procedures or treatments by saying that it was cosmetic as a basically, just to get out of not paying for it. And so what we did in 2022 was we explicitly stated that it's medically necessary to receive gender affirming care. We heard from individuals in committee that were young people that were talking about their experience in our healthcare system and the dramatic impact that not being able to access that care had on them. And so we passed that bill in 2022, and it ensures that every individual that needs access to gender affirming care will get it, and that the insurance companies have to provide coverage for that. So in addition to that, there's also House Bill 1541, which is the Nothing About Us Without Us Act. That bill applies generally to any group and says if we're going to have legislation or work groups in the legislature or in government, we have to ensure that the people that are being impacted by that legislation have a seat at the table in that decision or advising making process. And we know our LGBTQ folks are individuals. We want to make sure that we have more parity and more representation. We also have House Bill 1954. This is a bill I co-sponsored, and it's a bill to a follow-up bill from last year that ensures that the language around protecting providers and participation in reproductive health care services or gender affirming care treatment by healthcare providers is consistent with the standard of care in Washington. This is to ensure if individuals are providing care and it's inconsistent with another state law, that we're not going to have them facing action from other states or vice versa. It's very important for providers and protecting them in Washington state. We also have Keep Our Care Act that would protect access to care. LGBTQ community members are among the first to be hurt by mergers and acquisitions and consolidations. And this bill is aimed at having accountability and preventing some of these mergers from happening and having a better process for that. We know that when these mergers happen, in many cases, there's a decrease in quality care, and it's also more expensive for patients. And some of the mergers are by faith-based hospitals, and we want to make sure that patients continue to have access to care irregardless of a faith-based organizational hospital or not. We also have Senate Bill 5462, providing inclusive learning standards and instructional materials in public schools. This directs the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction to update learning standards to include the perspectives of LGBTQ people. And we also have a bill that was sponsored by Representative Cortez that requires changes to foster care. We did an extension a couple years ago and extended foster care from 18 to 21. And this creates more flexibility on the eligibility for individuals that are getting into foster or getting continuation of these services that are in foster care. We know that our LGBTQ members are disproportionately represented in their foster care population. So it's important that they continue to get those services and access to housing and care that they need up until that age of 2021, which is the current law. Thank you for that question.
Thank you kindly for that answer. We have a question now for Representative Doglio. It's about Budd Inlet. There seems to be very different opinions about the amount and location of toxins in Budd Inlet. What's being done and what can we do to clean it up?
Yeah, good question. So the scientific data comes from sampling that was conducted under the agreement with the Department of Ecology. And we know that the Army Corps of Engineers won't touch Budd Inlet because it is so contaminated in terms of the the canal, right, that ships would move through. So there is a move by the port to begin the process of doing that work here locally and funded by the state, the port, and the federal government in other ways besides the Army Corps of Engineers, which is on a nationwide sort of circuit of when they do dredging. So unfortunately, they won't touch this because it is so contaminated. We did put in, I think, $2.5 million last year to help get the process started, to help see what the plans could look like. I mean, obviously, there are a lot of things to figure out, as we also have the Deschutes Estuary, the dam coming out in time, and we'll have to deal with the sediment from that. And that will then compound the problem in Budd Inlet. And so we're thinking that Budd Inlet might need to be the contamination removed from there first before the dam can actually come out. So all of our community folks working on these projects are at the local level are probably much more up to speed on what's actually going on. And so I encourage you to reach out to the port and the city of Olympia and have these conversations directly with them. Also, Lot is very much a part of this because the nutrient levels are nearly over, are really influenced by that dam and the nutrient levels there. And so it is to their advantage and our advantage as ratepayers to try and get this figured out quickly and moved forward. So there you go. And I don't know who asked that question, but I'd be any of these would be great if you wanted to follow up at beth.doglio@ledge.wa.gov.
Thank you so much. We have a question now that I think is to all of you about crime and increasing crime in Thurston County and Pierce County, and what's being done about it.
I thought Representative Bateman already covered that. I do want to say one thing. I will say one thing in transportation that we're looking at, Transportation Committee. We have I think 129 state patrol are actually at retirement age. And, we have pretty low numbers of state patrol as it is. And so we are looking at some funding pieces, some bonuses, that sort of thing, to try and keep those state patrol from actually retiring, so that we don't continue to lose. And really proud of the work that our state has done through the CJTC, which is the training center. We're opening new training centers. In fact, Lacey I think they broke ground just this week on a new training center for police officers that will be a regional center. We're excited about that. We're hoping I think Senator Hunt is prioritizing getting money in for that project, as well as Representative Bateman. So that is something, we are at historic lows for police officers and state patrol, and we are making some efforts to improve on that.
Thank you so much. We have a schools question now about the Olympia School District facing the closure of 2 schools possibly, and any efforts the lawmakers can do to help mitigate that or the whole education funding crisis.
Yeah, so I've been in this role for about 6 years now, and my sense, having worked with the 3 districts that we represent, are Olympia School District, Tumwater School District, and North Thurston School District. And my sense, having worked with those 3 school districts, and we do meet with the superintendents, with teachers unions, with individual teachers, students, really very regularly. And I feel like Olympia has a structural budget issue with the small schools that they have. And so I feel like I feel like it's an important conversation to be having in terms of actually looking at some school closures. I was part of a school, Roosevelt, that did see John Rogers close, and those students came into Roosevelt Elementary when I was on the PTA there and a parent there, and it actually worked out really well. We had, people made it work because we became a bigger community, and there were more people and more hands to do the work of parents in the schools helping kids read and learn math and that sort of thing. So I know it's not a popular position, but I do believe that it is a structural issue for Olympia School District, and it's a hard thing for a community to take on. And I'm proud of our community for being as engaged as they are. I also was a superintendent's daughter in a school district in Illinois, and my dad, as superintendent, did have to close. Well, he changed the structure of the schools, and we went from from 2 high schools to 1 high school. And 40 years later, I went back and visited that school, and there's so much pride in what used to be my high school and now is a junior high. And more dollars to go around to assist students because of this consolidation of schools. So I think we need to keep that in mind moving forward, and hope that we can make some good decisions and sort of start to solve that structural problem that I believe Olympia School District has.
And I'd just like to add to that quickly with a couple numbers here, if I can find my chart. We're also working, I've got a bill that's working through the Senate. Hopefully we'll get it, but we need Republican votes because it requires a 2/3 to amend the Constitution to reduce school bond measures to 50% rather than 60%. And just point out that K-12 funding has grown from $9,600 a student in 2013 to $14,206 per student in 2023-24. Also, as an aside, 3,675 payments to the capital gains tax, that's the small number of people who paid the capital gains tax, generated $899 million this year, and most of that money goes to K-12 and higher education and K-12 construction.
Thank you so much for those answers on schools. We do have a question now about voting rights and House Bill 2030 for Representative Bateman.
Thank you. I got to be quick. I have to be quick over here. Sorry. I don't have a mouse at home and it's cumbersome. So this is a bill that Rep. Doglio and myself are both co-sponsors of. It is sponsored by Representative Tara Simmons, who is the first legislator in the country that's formerly incarcerated. And what it would do is that it would allow individuals that have been convicted of a felony and not the death penalty to be able to vote in Washington state. And so that would ostensibly allow for the voting of the majority of people that are in prisons in Washington. I think that it's important that all people have the right to vote. And when everyone can vote, our society is a better place. I think it also helps inmates and individuals that are in prison get connected and invested in their community by being engaged in politics, educating themselves, and exercising their right to vote. I also think that if we have categorically, if we have a system that imprisons people at a disproportionate rate that are people of color or low-income people, and those individuals don't have access to voting, it makes it less likely that lawmakers are going to be engaged with actions to prevent individuals from being in prison or working with individuals and that constituency of people that are in prison. That's why I support the bill, and I'm looking forward to moving that bill forward.
Thank you so much. Now we have a live question about gun control or gun safety legislation, Senate Bill 5444. I believe it's for Senator Hunt.
Thank you, Guy. We added several restrictions a couple years ago for where you can and can't carry firearms. They are not allowed in restricted areas of a jail or law enforcement facility, courtrooms, taverns, and other places designated off limits by people under 21 by the Liquor and Cannabis Board, and restricted areas of commercial airports. There are exemptions to this for military and law enforcement and people like that. This bill would expand areas where people cannot knowingly carry a weapon. Public libraries, zoos or aquarium, a neighborhood community, regional park, where children are likely to be present, transit stations, transit facilities, state or local public buildings, where state or public buildings means a building or part of a building owned, leased, or held by a government entity. So it's basically places where you would find kids, where there is lots of public activity and movement, and where we don't think guns should be allowed.
Thank you so much. We now have a question about reproductive rights for Representative Bateman.
Thank you. Yes, so we had a bill last year sponsored by Representative Stonier that would require insurance companies to also cover infertility treatment. That bill moved out of the House Healthcare and Wellness Committee last year, moved off the House floor, went to the Senate, was not able to pass there. So that bill has now gone into rules, and I'm hoping that we'll see that bill move forward in the legislative process.
Thank you so much. We have another question that just came in live. It's for Representative Doglio about recycling, the RAP Act, RERAP Act this year.
Yeah, we're making a lot of progress on the RAP Act this year. It's really exciting. We've been at this for quite some time. We are, we rank about 17th in terms of recycling. So we're not doing like terrible, but this is Washington State, and we can do a lot better than that. So what the RAP Act does is it makes the producers, the people who actually wrap the packages, responsible for building out a recycling system that would provide curbside recycling to nearly every resident in the state. Of course, we can't get to all rural residents, but certainly they would have opportunities to bring their recycling materials in. It would cover, I think, 320,000 more households. There's very little curbside recycling actually east of the mountains. I think only Spokane has regular curbside. So we would be expanding curbside recycling very extensively throughout the state, and the producers would actually be paying for that. So what you would not be paying. Local governments are carrying this load and have been carrying it for years and doing a decent job with it. But it's very challenging. And so if you bring in a certain amount of cardboard, say, or aluminum, you would actually pay into a producer responsibility organization based on the amount of material that you are bringing into our state. There would be one statewide list of materials that could be recycled that everyone would have. And so there'd be no confusion. I mean, how many times have you said, can this be recycled? Can this be recycled? It would be very clear. Our system would be much more uniform across the state. So if you go, for example, to another community that has a completely different system, we would try and work towards a uniformity so that you would know where to put it in, what color box to put it in, that kind of thing. It's really exciting, and I hope we see that get across the finish line. We're also looking at a bottle deposit program. 8 out of the 10 states that have the highest recycling rate do have a bottle deposit program, including Oregon, which has a very, very good one that has really changed over the years. And so we are looking at sort of adopting the Oregon model. Now, what a bottle deposit program offers is food grade recycling. It really increases the value of it because it's food grades. It's just the bottles, the aluminum, plastic, and glass bottles that you drink out of, as opposed to it being commingled in your curbside. And so it's a much more valuable commodity. It can be put back into the circular system much more easily. So we're looking at those two options. Hopefully we'll be able to get something across the finish line this year that starts to move us in that direction.
Thank you so much. Now we have a question about what happens next for Representative Bateman. There's a lot of words you guys have talked about tonight, like cutoff and house of origin and policy cutoff. Can you tell us what happens now that we're about 1/3 of the way through session?
Yeah, well, we all have our own respective bills that we're working on, and some of us are chairs of committees and working on getting all of those bills passed out of said committees. Tomorrow is our first policy cutoff, so all bills have to be moved out of those committees, exec out of those committees. And if they don't, they are dead. And so there's a lot of action that's happening in the next 24 hours. And then we'll go through another set of deadlines, fiscal policy cutoff, same thing, you have to get it moved out by that deadline. And then the House of Origin, where all bills that are proposed in the House have to make it across the House floor and over to the Senate, and vice versa. All bills introduced in the Senate have to make it off the Senate floor and to the other House in order for us to keep those bills moving. There's a number of these cutoff deadlines, and we're all working diligently to get our pieces of legislation across the finish line. And you can always track bills and talk to us, email us or ask to chat with us about updates on those. You can also subscribe to our e-newsletters and Facebook. We provide updates there, and you can stay in touch.
Thank you so much. We now have a question about a bill to establish a Boys and Men's Commission. So I think it's
I think it's an interesting concept. I don't believe, though, that boys and men have traditionally enjoyed higher salaries and much more privilege in our communities and in our culture than women and people of color. So I think that's why you see commissions that address people who have been systemically discriminated against, as opposed to in a commission that addresses boys and men. Now, that said, I have two sons, and I think it's certainly been a challenge. They happen to be in high school and college when COVID hit, and I think there have been some pretty unique challenges, particularly for our older one that was in college at this time. And so I think that we definitely need to lift up and appreciate and love all people in our communities, including boys and men. So I don't know what's happening with those bills. I do know that my ranking member on environment, Representative Mary Dye, I believe she might have the bill in the House, and she has done some good work and pulled together some meetings to discuss the statistics. And I think there is some interesting statistics out there.
Thank you so much for that question and that answer. We have one more question, a live question for Senator Hunt. It's right along his expertise. How can the legislature help to promote democracy and publicize what a dictatorship would do to freedoms?
How can I do this without getting political? I think one of the things that we do and that this legislature in this state has done very well is to make voting as open and accessible and secure as possible. We have the best voting system in the country. We have mail-in ballots, we have postage paid, we have drop boxes, we have election day registration, we have a very secure voter registration system. And I think that's one thing. I find it distressing, though, that even with all of that, we only had 38% of the people in Thurston County vote in last year's election. even when we were electing 2 new county commissioners and 2 new Port District commissioners. But it's a constant effort to make ourselves, known about democracy and to prove that democracy works and that it's better than any other form. And I'm standing by that.
Thank you so much, Senator. We are out of time for the questions live and the ones that came in before from the survey. So we're going to go to closing statements, and we'll start with Senator Hunt and then go back to the reps. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you all for attending tonight and giving up your dinner hour and some other things. And, there's some statements in the chat that are just not true. We aren't trying to triple your property taxes, and we don't have 1% of people voting, dead people voting. But anyway, I just want to thank you. This is really hard. We have over 1,000 bills that were introduced this year on top of over 1,000 last year. And when all is said and done, probably about 300 of these will become law. So it's a very tough sifting process. I've said several times the main difference between a 105-day session that we had last year and a 60-day session we have this year is that we try to cram 105 days work into 60 days. And, trying to be expert on all these bills, that even those that come before the committees we're on, but we really have to specialize and trust each other for their areas of expertise, or we couldn't get this done. And we have to do it together. We have to do it Republicans and Democrats, which most of the time is happening around here. People sometimes think that this is a Hatfield versus McCoy situation. It's not. We work with a number of the Republicans, and a number of the Republicans work with us, and that's how we get things done. And thank you again for joining us tonight.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining. I mean, this is what democracy is. This is our opportunity to answer questions that you asked. You asked some really great questions, and it was just, it's such an honor and a privilege to represent the 22nd Legislative District. I do want to encourage you to really reach out if you have ideas about bills, if you have things that need to be solved. Please reach out. I just want to mention I am running a bill that was inspired by a constituent at another town hall. That bill provides for an exemption of up to $600 a month of rental income in one's primary residence against the property tax exemption for low-income seniors, veterans, and those that are differently abled. So I am really excited that bill has moved out of, I believe it's out of 2 committees now, unanimously. Maybe it's just one out of finance unanimously, and heading to the heading to the floor. So it's just such a win-win. The cheapest form of housing we had is that's already been built. We're keeping money in seniors' pockets because they won't have to report that $600 of rent that they might have from a renter in their home. That low-income senior gets to keep that property tax exemption. So super excited about that bill, and it was brought to me by a constituent. So I encourage you to, reach out and keep the communication going as we move forward and into the interim, through session and then into the interim, because that's when new bills get born. So anyway, thank you so much for being here. It's an absolute pleasure to work in the 22nd Legislative District on your behalf.
Thanks, Beth, and thanks for highlighting a bill that's brought forward by a constituent, and I'm really excited about that bill. I also want to elevate a bill that Senator Hunt and I are sponsoring, which is a bill that would require all gyms to have an AED in place and staff that can use it. That came to us directly from a constituent that tragically lost a loved one in a gym locally. So your input and providing us with opportunities for advancing legislation on your behalf is very real and very important. I do want to thank staff for all of their work that they're doing to make this town hall happen, and all of their work to make our offices happen and function during session. Please reach out to any of our offices. My office, you can reach me or Casey, and we're happy to make an appointment or meet with you virtually or schedule some time after session. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to serve you here in the legislature and work on your behalf on pieces of legislation and issues, advocating for you. And again, want to thank everyone for making tonight happen and people for joining and participating. We couldn't do this work without you. And I've always had a quite active and engaged 22nd legislative district, and I'm sure that will continue. So we'll keep working with you to update you after this process moves forward, so we can tell you all the things that were successful out of those 1,000 bills that were introduced this year. We'll see how many of them make it. We're optimistic that we'll get some good ones passed. So thanks, everybody.